when we hedge it. I know what word you're trying to say, but it's actually called a hatch, okay? And yes, hatching line shows that an object has been sectioned. All right, can anybody tell me what's another form of showing internal dimensions or internal features of a drawing? Apart from projecting a section, another way you can show internal aspects. Yes, Kirsten, hidden lines. Hidden lines is the other way that we show features of a design. However, sometimes when you have lots of different internal features, hatch lines, they become less obvious as to what. Like in this case here, if we were to just be given this side elevation, you wouldn't be able to clearly tell that this outside hatch line represents the holes, the one inside represents the keyway, and the other one represents the actual shaft hole. Okay, you wouldn't be able to obviously tell that just by looking at this end elevation. So hidden lines work to an extent. Sometimes you need to project a separate view. And in most cases, that's a sectional view. So for some of you in your project, you may wish to use sectional views to include in your detailed drawings. For some of you, you have one part that is quite complex, has a lot of internal shapes, so a section view works best. Other times, you may have an exploded view or an assembly view. Others, you can also combine a sectional view with an assembly view. You know, there's lots of different examples of combinations of 2 or more engineering drawings. A lot of students have been asking me what exact kind of drawings do they need to include in the detailed drawings for the project? And my answer will remain, there's no set like quota that you have to meet. You don't have to meet a certain number of detailed drawings. You do as many drawings as you think best describe your design. Some of you, it may be 1 orthographic projection and 5 exploded views will be enough to clearly show your design. Others, you may not use any exploded views. You might use section and auxiliary views. Okay, and there's no maximum and there's no minimum amount of drawings that you can have. So keep that in mind. Just whatever you think best tells your story. Again, we're all just trying to tell a story through our projects. So there's no quota, but if you do a drawing, you have to be sure that you do it very professionally, okay? You have to do all the dimensioning correctly, you know, title block, everything, captions, notes here and there, properly utilizing all of the line functions, so darker lines, lighter lines, all those kind of things. So if you go for a certain detailed drawing that you're going to use in your project, make sure that you do it to a professional standard or to a very high standard and not just for the sake of doing it. So like last week, how we had attendance given for people who did the isometric view of the activity from last week. For this week, to get your attendance, you have to complete the isometric sectional view and the sectional view front elevation of this object. Is that clear? And for all of you who missed out last week on submitting your isometric drawing, I'll give you the chance to get your attendance for last week by submitting both the activity from last week and this week's activity by Sunday. And if you do that, you get attendance for week 10 and week 11. Is that clear? Okay, great. I said last week that you had to also complete your auxiliary drawing as part of your activity for this week. However, I know you guys have a lot on your plate at the moment with assignments due, this project due, as well as your other units that you're taking. So instead of overloading you guys with tutorial activities for attendance, I'll just say you have to do the sectional view. And if you've done the auxiliary view and you want to show me, then you can send it and I'll have a look. But I won't make it compulsory that you do the auxiliary activity. Okay, so I'll just show you what the basically what we're looking at when we talk about this object and the sectional view. So this is a three-dimensional model of what we're looking at, this part. I've developed this using a software called SolidWorks. You could have done it, I could have done it using AutoCAD, but my AutoCAD doesn't work too well on my laptop. So this is a three-dimensional object. And essentially what we're doing is we're creating a section plane along half of its width and cutting the object in half. So this yellow plane here that I'm moving around is the sectional plane. It is parallel to the front view, parallel to the front plane. We could also make it parallel to the right plane. So this direction. And if the arrow and the dotted line was oriented differently, this may have been our sectional view. But notice if we were to put the sectional view on the end or parallel to the end, you wouldn't really see much detail or much variation in detail as you move. So the blue is the actual sectional projection that we are cutting through. And there's not much that you can tell from the design just by moving it along this plane. But if we switch it over to look at it from the front view, you see a lot more detail. Yeah, you see this hole, the keyway, this divot, or this extruded cut, and then the boss extrusions for the holes. Okay, you get a lot more detail by the direction that you orient your sectional plane. So if you use this in your project, be mindful of the direction, the orientation that you set your sectional plane at, so that it gets the most, so that it's most effective, so that it shows the most of the internal design as possible. Okay. So as you move the plane further towards the center, we see more and more details until we reach the center where we see the most detail. We see this hole, this keyway, this hole, and this extruded cut. So when you guys submit your isometric view of the sectioned object, it will look something like this. Okay. These activities are all about how well you can visualize things in your mind in 3D space. You know, it's a skill, and it's something that you need to work on. Definitely work on through your years as you study as an engineer. Your 3D visualization. It'll get tested here and there, and it's good that if you work it out all in 101, so that when you get to units like 103, where you start to do analysis and structures and trusses, you have a good understanding of how to visualize something that's two-dimensional as a three-dimensional object. And when you guys do your front view, your sectional front view, it will look something like this. All right, with your hatch lines at 45 degrees. Do you have any questions about sectional views or this week's activity? If you're joining this tutorial session from a different tutorial session, like this is not your tutorial session, please post your submission to your respective tutorial groups on Viber. The Viber group for Friday 2 to 3 is only for members who have signed up for this session. Any questions? Any questions, guys? Okay. So speaking of your project, group leaders, how's the progress? Are you happy with the work of your group members and the progress of the project so far? Ideally, you guys should be wrapping up the detailed drawing process this weekend. By the end of the weekend, hopefully finishing all the detailed drawings so that week 12, week 13, you can focus more on your report compilation as well as your PowerPoint presentation, preparing for your PowerPoint presentation. Presentation is definitely a skill, and it's not something that you can just easily go in front of a group of people and start doing. It takes a little bit of practice. So please, I recommend that if you guys can finish your PowerPoint slides and have your presentation ready by the beginning of week 14, you can spend the rest of week 14 perfecting your presentation style. You know, the tone of your voice, the volume of your voice, the assertion that you speak with, making sure that you're audible and clear, you enunciate properly. Refrain from using fillers like and, so on and so forth. Make sure that your slides are clear, full of information, or not full of information, full of the most important information, but not too crowded with words, not too overloaded with color or fancy effects. You want the focus of the audience to be on your information and on your voice as you present. Right, you have a few benefits to doing it online through Zoom. You don't have to worry about what you're wearing or your appearance so much. You can focus more on how you say the words and how you convey the information. You can rehearse it a bit more, and there's less nerves because you're not looking at people in their face. The downside, of course, is you don't get to get like bounce back off the audience's expressions or their reactions. That's a bit of a downside. Another plus side is your presentation slides. You don't have to worry about making them really, really big or making sure that your words are really, really huge, because you're not trying to project it to a whole auditorium full of people. Everybody's going to be looking at the screen, looking at what you're doing. Again, the presentation is for 15 minutes. And in a group of about 4 members, that's about 3.5 minutes each. And everybody in the group has to present, and you all have to have even time. There will be timers, and we will be timing you individually, making sure that you all have even amount of slides to present as well as words to say. Some of you haven't done, say, some of the possible solutions. When it comes to question and answers section, which is at the end of the presentation, 5 minutes, 5-minute block given for question and answers. In that 5 minutes, we can ask any group member any question about any section in the report. So even though you didn't do literature review, or it wasn't your responsibility to do literature review, if we ask you something about the literature review, then you have to know. So group members and group leaders, please clearly communicate every single step that you're doing throughout this project so that everybody's on the same page. Okay. Maybe next week's tutorial, I'll discuss a little bit about making an effective PowerPoint presentation, but there are lots of resources on YouTube and people, talking from their experience on how to best set up a PowerPoint presentation that is capturing, that is effective, that is information, and that is professional. Because professionalism is a very important part too in the presentation. You have to have an air of professionalism about you. It can't be informal, even though an informal one may be more engaging to the audience. Remember that we are engineers and this is a profession, so we have to keep a certain air of professionality about the way that we do things, professionalism that we do, the way that we do things. It is very important also that we get, since we can't have face-to-face classes and I can't make my own assessments in class on who's participating and who's contributing the most, you know, which people are lacking behind and which people are just there for a free ride. I can't do that now because we are doing virtual classes. So I rely a lot on the feedback from you guys, your group leaders, as well as individuals. If you have issues with certain members who are contributing their fair share, please, you have to let me know before the presentations come about so that I can factor that into the marking. If not, then you have essentially given that person a free ride through MM101. And that's not only not good for you because it'll bring your grade down, but it'll also affect them in the long run because they'll think that they can get away with it. It'll affect the reputation of the university because we will start churning out engineers or people who haven't learned the concepts or haven't learned the theory or haven't learned the software or what they haven't learned. They've only learned how to use other people to get by. And then when they hit the industry, these people are the ones who are liability, who are there just for the money and they don't care about people or society. So please do your part. And it's also your part or your responsibility to point out wrongdoing or people not cooperating. I'm glad to say that some students have already come forward and brought my attention to certain group members who aren't participating. If you feel like you're one of them who isn't doing their fair share, you still have a few weeks to pull up your socks and make a difference. But if you don't, then unfortunately, we'll be seeing you again next year. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. The project, if you guys want to send it back to me this weekend to have a second look after you've made the changes from the draft report, I'll be happy to do so. But next week I won't be looking at any more projects or reports for review. Next week we'll discuss the assignment, your assignment questions, and if you have any questions based on the assignment, we're not clear about anything, then we'll cover that next week in the tutorial. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say or any question that you'd like to ask? For those of you who joined late, the attendance activity for this week is the sectional view isometric and the sectional view front elevation of this object, tutorial activity 9. If you complete these, you can either do it using AutoCAD or you can do it just your proper tools, pencil, paper, rulers, set squares, compass, all that, and develop the drawings that way. It says here use a 1-to-1 scale, but if you're unable to print this out, then you can just eyeball the dimensions. Just make estimations as to what you think would be a fair dimension. Okay, guys, does anybody have anything else to add? So I have a problem with my CAD lab because there's something wrong with my AutoCAD. Something wrong as in what, Inya? Does your application not work? Does the software not work properly? Okay. Do you know who your lab demonstrator is? PGM guys. So Tevita Seru, maybe? If you can, maybe contact him and let him know about your issue. And he'll be able to advise you as to what to do. Obviously, there are students all across this course who have issues with AutoCAD or not being able to access the software or don't have a laptop. And there are measures that we can take that are like last resort measures, and they will be discussed further in the end towards the end of the semester. But you have to provide some sort of proof or evidence as to why you can't actually perform the labs for it to be a genuine reason. So if you could take a screenshot of the error that pops up every time you open AutoCAD or the issues that you have, if you can clearly explain that to your lab demonstrator, then he'll be able to help you. Is that okay with you, India? 7. So could we freehand the isometric section drawing for this activity? By freehand, like some of you took TD in high school, so you know how to do isometric curves. So for those of you who do know how you could actually do the proper isometric curves using a compass and everything, but I understand that not all of you took TD, so freehanding the curves is fine, so long as it's neat. But the actual straight lines and stuff, I recommend that you use your set squares to come up with those angles. Yeah, just the straight lines. The curves you can freehand. The due time for the tutorial activity is Sunday. So instead of making it Sunday midday, anytime Sunday, you send it to me, then you'll get attendance for this week. So can I know by when we need to present our project in PowerPoint? So your project presentation will be during your tutorial session in week 14. So that is what date? That is the 25th of this month. Okay, and the time will be during your tutorial session. So we'll start at 2 and it'll go for 2 hours. So we'll finish at 4. Okay, guys, any more questions? So if there are no more questions, thank you very much for joining this afternoon. You have a blessed weekend, and I'll see you all next week.